You're listening to the podcast of Iris Josephina. If you're passionate about exploring the menstrual cycle, cyclical living, body wisdom, personal growth, spirituality, and running a business in alignment with your natural cycles, you're in the right place. I'm Iris. I'm an entrepreneur, functional hormone specialist, trainer, and coach, and I am on a mission to share insights, fun facts, and inspiration I discover along the way as I run my business and walk my own path on Earth. Here, you'll hear my personal stories, guest interviews, and vulnerable shares from clients and students. Most people know me from Instagram, where you can find me under @CycleSeeds, or they have been a coaching client or student in one of my courses. I'm so grateful you're here. Let's dive into today's episode. Hey, and welcome to a new episode of the In the Rhythms podcast. It took me a minute to come back online and spend some time on my podcast. My personal private life has been extremely hectic, and I simply didn't have the capacity in any way, shape, or form to create a lot of content. The good news is that in the midst of all this craziness, I got a kitten, and he is sitting here next to me. You may hear him purr. His name is Bibu, and he is the sweetest little one. And I'm just so happy he is in my life. And yeah, taking care of a little animal, it brings me so much fulfillment. And yeah, for today's episode, I want to discuss a topic that actually made me really angry. Maybe you have noticed, especially if you are like in Europe or in every other country that practices daylight saving time. And oh my God, it's such a mess. This whole practice, I have so much to say about it. So grab a cup of tea, sit down or go on a walk or do your workout and listen to everything that I have to say. And I'm going to start off by saying daylight saving time is a massive biological stressor, and we are not loud enough about that. We are not critical enough about that. And I am going to take a deep dive with you into circadian rhythm, hormones, metabolism, mood, and the menstrual cycle. So let's get started. So every year, the conversation around this time is the same. Like, people complain about being tired for a few days around daylight saving time. They joke about, daylight saving time on social media. At least that's what I've seen this year. People grab an extra coffee. Maybe they feel a little off or a little foggy or a little bit more irritable than usual. And most people just move on and don't really care about it. But what usually does not get talked about enough is what is actually happening inside the body during that transition window. Because when you stop looking at this as a cultural inconvenience and really start looking at it through the lens of physiology, the picture changes completely. And once you understand the science, you're like, what the actual F are we doing to our bodies? And when you look at the actual research, daylight saving time, especially the spring transition that we're going through right now, is not just annoying. It really is a population scale circadian disruption event. And the downstream health effects show up very clearly in research and numbers. And it is honestly beyond me that nobody is doing something about this. We see more heart attacks, more strokes, more fatal car accidents, more workplace injuries, sleep disruption, metabolic dysregulation, mood instability, and in my view, a much deeper conversation we're still not having enough is about the effects on hormone health, fertility, and the menstrual cycle. Because the thing is, and if you've done any of my courses, especially my course Cyclical, You know that the body does not organize itself around the wall clock. Your body organizes itself around light and darkness. And daylight saving time asks millions of people to suddenly live against that reality, that fact, that blueprint overnight. So today, I want to walk through the history of daylight saving time, why it is fundamentally unnatural from a biological perspective, what it does to circadian rhythm, what it does to melatonin, cortisol, serotonin, insulin sensitivity, cardiovascular health, and metabolic health, and why this absolutely belongs in the conversation around the menstrual cycle and fertility health too. So the first thing that I want to say is that daylight saving time was never, ever, ever created for health. It was introduced during World War I as an economic and industrial strategy. Basically, it was seen as a way to conserve energy and maximize daylight hours during the workday. From this energy perspective, like there has been some research that actually shows just like 0.5% of energy saving, which I think is crazy. Like, why would you throw off your biology to save like 0.5% of energy output? Like, what? So from the beginning, it was about so-called efficiency. It was about output. It was about productivity. And technically, it was about squeezing more usable labor and activity out of the day. And it was not created because anybody thought it was good for the nervous system. It was not because anybody thought it supported hormone health. And it was not created because it made human biology more coherent, which is in essence what we want when we look at health. We are looking for biological coherence. And this is not it. This is not it. Oh my God, this stuff makes me so angry. I'm just going to try to contain my anger as I move through this episode because there is just too much. Whew. So I think one of the core problems of modern life is that we keep taking systems designed for economics and industry and then acting shocked when the body struggles inside of them. Daylight saving time is one of the clearest examples of that. Let's say it's a social policy imposed onto biology with the desire to create more output, more consumerism, more labor out of people. There also has been some research that when we do daylight saving time, people go shopping more and go out of the door later to buy things. And, with all of this, I'm just starting to wonder, like, are we really so brainwashed that we just blindly, disrupt our biology for the sake of culture and social policy? Because the thing is, biology does not care what politicians, governments, office culture, social policy decides that the clock should say. Your cells simply still respond to light and darkness. They're not really changing that. But the environment does change. And the environment is thrown off. So it throws off your biology. Let me explain to you why daylight saving time is biologically unnatural. And this is just my standpoint. Daylight saving time is unnatural. It's unnatural, like not in some like dramatic woo-woo vague way. No, it's literal disruptive, physiologically wrong. Because if you boil it down to just plain biology, humans are biologically primed for brighter days, darker nights, morning light exposure, and evening darkness to set all the body clocks, specifically our suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is our mother clock in our brain, and all of the daughter clocks, which are the peripheral clocks in every single hormone, every single organ. And this contrast of light and darkness, it tells the brain what time it is. and it anchors our circadian rhythm. We are really designed to live in relationship with the rising and setting of the sun. And we are not primed or designed to live with a social clock that suddenly jumps forward by an hour and expects the entire endocrine, nervous, metabolic, and cardiovascular system to just adapt instantly. That is not how the body works. Your circadian system is a light-based timing system. It's not a watch-based timing system. And when social time suddenly shifts, but our solar reality does not, your body and your biology experiences that as a mismatch. And that mismatch is what we call circadian misalignment. Let me go over what the circadian rhythm is very briefly. If you want to learn more about this, get on the waitlist for my course Cyclical, because I go very, very deep into everything that I'm talking about today and how you can support your body. So the circadian rhythm is basically your internal 24-hour timing system. It regulates sleep and wake timing, hormone production, appetite and digestion, body temperature, your alertness and focus, your immune function, your mood, your metabolism, and your reproductive signaling. At the center of the system is your CSN, what I like to call the mother clock, your suprachiasmatic nucleus. And this mother clock is primarily synchronized by light coming into your eyes. Morning light basically tells your brain, hello, the day has begun. And as light enters the eye, melatonin production is suppressed and cortisol begins to rise in a healthy morning rhythm. This is also known as the cortisol awakening response. And that morning cortisol rise is not inherently bad. Like people these days tend to see like, oh my God, cortisol, bad, stress. No, the cortisol is literally what wakes you up in the morning, mobilizes energy in your body, it sharpens your alertness, and it really gets your physiology ready for the day. And then later in the evening, as light levels start to fall, your pineal gland begins producing melatonin, which helps prepare the body for sleep and nighttime repair. So I hope you're already seeing the problem. If we reduce morning light and increase evening light, we distort the signals that tell the body when to wake and when to sleep. And that is exactly what daylight saving time does. It fucks up this system. And the spring shift is the real problem. So the one that we've just moved through if you are in a country where we have adopted daylight saving time. So when clocks move forward in spring, mornings literally become darker and evenings literally become lighter. And it sounds like this is like some small thing, but physiologically, oh my goodness, it's not small at all. Because the problem is not just that you quote unquote lose an hour. The real problem is that the timing of light exposure changes in the most disruptive way possible. You get less light when you need it the most in the morning and more light when it is disruptive in the evening. This means melatonin release gets delayed, sleep onset gets pushed to a later time, wake time is forced earlier by a social clock, but the sunrise maybe happens way after, and cortisol timing becomes misaligned and the body is effectively asked to function before it's truly ready. Because we are light beings, and I don't mean this in a woo-woo way or a spiritual way, we are literally responding to light. This is why the spring shift is consistently associated with more harm than the autumn shift, because the autumn shift moves us onto standard time. It is more connected to our biological time. And the spring shift creates what we can call social jet lag. And except, an actual jet lag where you get on a plane and you change time zones, this is a government mandated circadian disruption event that people are expected to absorb as though nothing happened. And to me, that is really cuckoo. I find it so crazy. And I really want to discuss some research on this because people just brush it off like, oh, I'm just, for a couple of days, I feel a little bit bad. But the research is crazy. So Some of the strongest evidence around daylight saving time concerns the cardiovascular system. There are some studies, and one of them in particular found that there is a 24% increase in heart attacks on the Monday immediately following the spring daylight saving time shift. A 24% spike on that Monday. And other studies have included data from Sweden, Finland, Germany, Croatia, Brazil, and Mexico, and they have found similar patterns. Researchers still see like a modest but statistically significant increase in heart attacks after the spring transition. So even if different countries show slightly different effect sizes, the pattern is real enough that it keeps showing up across populations. And this is where people usually say, but it's just 1 hour. This is exactly the point. The cardiovascular system is highly sensitive to sleep loss, autonomic stress, inflammatory signaling, blood pressure changes, and circadian disruption. And it does not take a giant insult to create a measurable risk, especially in a vulnerable population. So what happens when we create acute sleep deprivation and shifts in our body like that? So it can elevate sympathetic nervous system activity. It can increase inflammatory signaling. It can disrupt cortisol timing. It can raise blood pressure variability and just technically put more strain on the cardiovascular system. So when a whole population is suddenly asked to be so misaligned, it should not be surprising that we see like an uptick in cardiac events. And it's biology. It's what happens. The same story appears with stroke. Research has found an increased stroke risk in the first days following the daylight saving time transition, with one study showing around 8% increase in stroke risk during the first 2 days after the spring shift. And this hits people who have less physiological resilience the hardest. So people already immunocompromised, people with cancer, older adults. And for some people, this is a real physiological destabilization event. And I think we need to be much more cautious about this. Now let's talk about metabolism. This is also a topic that I believe doesn't get enough attention. So one of the most important things that people do not understand is how quickly compromised sleep can disrupt insulin sensitivity. Even one night or 1 or 2 nights of restricted or poor sleep can measurably impair insulin sensitivity. That means that your cells become less responsive to insulin, glucose regulation becomes less efficient, blood sugar becomes less stable, and the body needs to work harder to maintain this balance. And that is not like some extremely rare scenario. That's just what sleep disruption does. And daylight saving time does not only steal 1 hour on one night, the spring shift often creates several days of degraded sleep quality, of sleep fragmentation, delayed sleep onset, and just persistent circadian strain. If we layer all of this on top of one another, what happens? Less sleep, lighter evenings, darker mornings, delayed melatonin, altered cortisol timing, more fatigue, more cravings, worse recovery. People are operating on a more metabolically dysregulated state. This is why during this transition window, people may often experience, and I'm going through that right now, like my cravings are through the roof. I have not had cravings in months. People experience more hunger, worse cravings, more sugar or carb seeking, lower energy, poorer workout recovery, worse blood sugar stability, more irritability. That's me also because I'm angry about all of this, and more stress reactivity. And this matters even more in people who already struggle with metabolic health. So people who have insulin resistance. If you are in your luteal phase when this happens, when you're naturally more insulin resistant, it will hit you harder. People who are pre-diabetic, people with PCOS and obesity. And if we keep looking at this metabolic story, sleep does not just affect insulin. It also affects the hormonal systems that regulate hunger, like the feeling of satisfaction after a meal, and stress. So when your sleep is shortened or fragmented, leptin tends to go down and ghrelin tends to go up, which means that people often feel hungrier, less satisfied, more impulsive around food, and less metabolically stable overall. At the same time, cortisol is getting pushed around. So normally cortisol should rise in the morning in sync with light exposure and the wake process. But when people are forced to wake earlier while mornings are still darker, that normal cortisol awakening response can become less aligned with actual behavior and clock time. So now you have a stress hormone rhythm that feels off, an appetite hormone rhythm that feels off, blood sugar regulation that feels off, and a body that is trying to function on less and worse sleep. So what do most people do? I actually had a conversation with a client about this as well. So people reach for more caffeine, they push through, they maybe drink alcohol in the evening to unwind. We see, in just general society that people stay inside all day, don't go outside enough, which makes the cycle worse. And, daylight saving time can set off this whole cascade. We have circadian disruption, we have poorer sleep, we have impaired insulin sensitivity, we have worse appetite regulation, more fatigue and stimulants that people, ingest, and even worse sleep. And that's why I do not think this should be minimized at all. If we then dive a little bit deeper into more hormone timing pieces, we can look at melatonin, serotonin, and cortisol again. So when we look at melatonin is released in response to darkness. It helps you to initiate your sleep, but it's not just a sleep hormone. It's really involved in repair, antioxidant protection, mitochondrial health, immune signaling, and reproductive physiology. So when daylight saving time gives us more light later in the evening, melatonin release gets suppressed or delayed. So people do not just go to bed later because they chose to. Their biology is being told, hello, it is still daytime, no time to sleep yet. That means that sleep onset can be harder. There is a later sleep timing, there is a poorer recovery, and there is more circadian drift. If we then look at cortisol is supposed to rise in the morning. Morning light is one of the strongest anchors for that rhythm. But during the spring shift, mornings are darker and wake time is earlier. So now you may have a blunted or poorly aligned cortisol rhythm, which can look like difficulty waking, grogginess, feeling tired but wired, having poor energy, having a sluggish mood. This was me yesterday and today. And then the second wind energy later in the day when you really don't want it. Like at 9 or 11 p.m., your body is like, ooh, we have a lot of energy. Let's go. Let's stay up. But obviously this interrupts with your sleep. Last hormone that I want to discuss here is serotonin. Serotonin is also part of this conversation because daylight exposure plays a very important role in mood and daytime neurochemistry. And serotonin is actually a precursor to melatonin, which is your sleep hormone. So when people get less morning light and more evening light, this can contribute to both mood disruption and poor sleep regulation. This is why research has linked daylight saving time shifts, especially the spring one, to worsened mood outcomes, anxiety, depressive disorders, and emotional instability. So from a hormonal and neurochemical perspective, daylight savings time is not neutral at all. It's not just a small thing, and it perturbs the timing of melatonin, cortisol, serotonin-related mood regulation, glucose handling, and insulin sensitivity. And that's a lot of physiological disruption for something people still joke about. Like, it's just a cute seasonal annoyance. Like, it's not. It's really not that innocent. And then something that I found interesting, I wasn't really looking at this, but, I was doing my research and I found out that the effects of daylight saving time don't stay internally in the body. They also show up externally because apparently we see an increased fatal car accident rate in the period following the spring shift. And we also see apparently, increased workplace injuries. In essence, it makes sense because sleep deprivation impairs our reaction time, it impairs vigilance, it impairs decision making, it impairs motor coordination and attention. So when that is happening across an entire population at the same time, basically what this says is that roads and workplaces become less safe. And this is why some people keep calling this a population scale circadian disruption event. Because apparently it doesn't just affect personal discomfort and comfort and, biology, but apparently it also affects collective safety. That's a big thing, no? And then we already spoke about...
This wraps up today's episode.
Serotonin.
Thank you so much for listening. Want to know more about me? The best way to reach me is at CycleSeeds
circadian
on Instagram.
misalignment
And if you
also
heard something
affects
today
emotional
and you think,
regulation.
oh my God, wow, I learned something new.
So
feel free to share
in
the
the days
podcast on
following
your
the
social
spring
media
shift,
and
studies
tag
have
me.
reported
Or
increased
leave a
depressive
review or rating.
symptoms,
In this
more
way,
mood
you help me reach more
disturbance,
people
greater
like you.
irritability,
Thank you
worsened
so much.
anxiety, and in some cases, there is concern around increased suicide risk. Although that piece is more complex and should be handled carefully, there is some research that is touching upon that. What I take out of this is that the sleep deprivation and circadian disruption makes people less emotionally resilient. And this fits what we know from broader sleep science. So when your cortisol timing is off, your sleep is fragmented, your serotonin melatonin rhythm is disrupted. And if you already are under modern life stress, your ability to regulate your mood and your emotions becomes less stable. So if someone already struggles with anxiety, depression, burnout, trauma, or nervous system dysregulation, this transition to daylight saving time can be a real trigger point, because physiology is under more stress. And I have ADHD. It messes with me so much because I had such a good rhythm. And I love getting up early. I love getting up with the sunrise and having this feeling that I have an ocean of time. So the sun was rising here around 6 a.m. And I feel like, wow, I have such an ocean of time before I need to start work at 9. I can do all these things. I can do my journaling. I can go on a walk. I can go to the gym. I can have my breakfast. But now, all of a sudden, it's this hour later. And the sun rises at 7. And there is less time before it's 9 a.m. between the sunrise and 9 a.m. when I need to start, the things that I need to do during the day. So it gives me so much anxiety that I feel pressured and stressed because there is less time between sunrise and what I need to do during the day. And I think it's really messed up. And I would love to know from, other people who have ADHD or even autism, how is this affecting you? Because it's definitely affecting me. I don't like it at all. I actually hate it. I hate how it feels in my body. I don't like feeling pressured. I do really, really, really well when I have a rhythm that is, timed around light availability during the day. So I live from sunrise to sunset on, standard time when it's more biologically appropriate. And now it just feels all messed up. And I would love to take this conversation into fertility and menstrual cycle health, because I don't think this gets talked about nearly enough. So circadian rhythm disruption does not just stay in the sleep lane or metabolic health. It also moves downstream into reproductive physiology, because the menstrual cycle is a very energy-dependent, timing-dependent rhythm, and every phase of our menstrual cycle requires precision, not only from our reproductive hormones, but also from our circadian hormones. And, follicular phase requires energy and signaling for follicle growth and rising estrogen. Ovulation is a highly coordinated signaling event. The luteal phase depends on progesterone production, which is deeply energy-dependent and one of the most mitochondria-dependent processes in female physiology. But your menstrual cycle is not just hormonal. It's also circadian, it's mitochondrial, it's metabolic, it's light informed, it's stress sensitive. So when our circadian rhythm is disrupted, the body may respond with irregular cycles, delayed or disrupted ovulation, lower progesterone resilience, worsened PMS, poorer energy availability, more inflammation, more blood sugar instability, and more stress signaling. And, we also have the insulin piece. So insulin is not just about blood sugar, it also affects ovarian function, androgen balance, and follicle development. And so when sleep disruption impairs insulin sensitivity, that can absolutely impact menstrual cycle health and fertility too. And it's especially relevant for people who have PCOS or irregular cycles, subclinical infertility, luteal phase issues, PMS, chronic stress, or just fragile metabolic health. So, in my opinion, daylight saving time really belongs in the hormone health conversation as well, because the body reads light as information. And when timing information is distorted, reproduction is one of the systems that become less stable in the body. And how I see all of this is that people are being asked to live their lives against a clock. And the way that modern society has been built up already states this. Like, we are under artificial light for way too many hours. We sit too much. We don't see the sunrise and the sunset. And what I see is that the wall clock says something, but our body clock then goes like, yeah, but I want to do this at another time. And it's a chronic timing mismatch. And we already know from shift work what happens when people live in chronic out of sync states with their biology. Shift workers have higher rates of obesity, diabetes, coronary heart disease, cancer, mood disorders, reproductive issues, and on average, an earlier death. And, I'm not saying that daylight saving time is identical to shift work, but I'm saying that it activates the same basic mechanism, which is circadian misalignment. And once you understand that part, it becomes very hard to just dismiss it as something harmless. And another important point here is that even if people agree that we should stop switching the clocks, it does not automatically mean that permanent daylight saving time is the best solution. A lot of circadian researchers argue that standard time is actually better for health because it preserves more morning light, and morning light is the strongest anchor for the circadian system. And, more evening light may feel more like socially convenient. It may feel nicer for like shopping or dinners or outdoor activities, but it does not mean it's better for the biology of sleep, metabolism, mood, or hormone regulation. And, what feels fun economically or culturally is not always what best supports human physiology. And I think we should pay a lot more attention to that, because we have a lot of health issues going on in our society these days that I feel could be positively impacted if we included circadian misalignment in our assessment of health issues. So my recommendation is to take this more seriously than our culture tells us to do. And daylight saving time is a policy decision that was never ever built around human biology. I want us to become more aware of that. It's a biological stressor. And I don't want to, create fear around this, but I would love to create critical conversation about this, because we accept so many things in our society that are of, an economic benefit intention or like productivity focused. And these things are not in essence bad, but I do feel we need to start asking questions when it starts affecting our biology, because our biology is everything. And if we have biology that responds to proper timing cues, we support our overall general health and we preserve our health on the long term. And I hope that this was disturbing and inspiring to you. I hope you learned something new today. If you are interested in learning more about, circadian biology, and you are seeing that we are inherently cyclical by design, I would love to invite you to join the waitlist for my course, Cyclical. I run this course multiple times per year, and inside of it, I teach you how to live in accordance with your biological timing, and how when you start doing that, we create a downstream effect and our hormones start to respond and balance on their own. So if you're interested, go check the show notes, sign up for the waitlist, and I cannot wait to see you there. Thank you for listening. Okay, this wraps up today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Want to know more about me? The best way to reach me is via @CycleSeeds on Instagram. And if you heard something today and you think, oh my God, wow, I learned something new, feel free to share the podcast on your social media and tag me. Or leave a review or rating. In this way, you help me reach more people like you. Thank you so much.